So, good morning. The parable of the Good Samaritan must be one of the best known of all gospel stories. Over the centuries, the term Good Samaritan has become a common metaphor, synonymous with anyone who does good deeds, especially someone who rescues or helps out needy strangers. The Good Samaritan has become an archetype, a paragon of going beyond typical expectations to care for others. And numerous organizations are named after the Good Samaritan. So, a man is going from Jerusalem to Jericho. He's attacked by robbers who strip him, beat him, and leave him for dead. Two well-respected people, a priest and a Levite, pass by without helping him. But a Samaritan stops and cares for him. There was no love lost between the Jews and the Samaritans, yet this surprising rescuer takes the man to an inn where he pays generously for his care. And the story ends with Jesus giving a commandment to go and do the same as the Samaritan has done. It's a compelling story, and if you Google Good Samaritan, you will find a plethora of bumper sticker interpretations of its meaning. Help when someone needs help. Be kind, even to your haters. We should love everyone, including our enemies. Help without expecting something in return. Perhaps more than any other of Jesus' parables, this one invites soundbite interpretations. The first observation I would like to make is that nowhere in the Bible story is the Samaritan actually referred to as the Good Samaritan. In fact, the word good doesn't actually appear anywhere in the reading that Jules has just given us. And that opens up the question that I would like to sit with this morning. I would like us to think about what is it that makes the Good Samaritan good? And to do this, I'd like us to consider three things. Firstly, I'd like us to think a little bit about the context of the story. Secondly, I'd like us to reflect on the potential motivations of the characters. And finally, I'd like us to dig into the Samaritans a bit more. Who were they, and what was their relationship with the Jews? So, context. We find a lawyer, that is, an expert in the Jewish law, approaching Jesus in order to test him. We're not really sure how adversarial this is. Yes, we're told this is a test, but he calls Jesus teacher respectfully. And Jesus seems to engage with him on equal terms. The lawyer knew his scriptures well. When Jesus asks what is written in the law, the lawyer quotes from Deuteronomy chapter 6 and the 19th chapter of Leviticus, which contain the two great commandments, to love God and to love your neighbor. Jesus agrees with this answer. It does not seem that he takes the lawyer's test as that of an adversary, necessarily. Then the lawyer asks his second question, who is my neighbor? And after hearing Jesus' parable, the lawyer again gets the right answer, although he doesn't seem to be able to actually say the word Samaritan. Jesus is not dismissing the law or its teachers, but Jesus is pushing back on something here. Jesus is not pushing back on the law, but rather on how the law is observed. The lawyer is someone who knows the law, but who can't or won't put it into practice. He is someone who would know what he would find if he read further on into Leviticus. In chapters 33 and 34, he would find, when an alien resides in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be as a citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." Speaking through Moses in Leviticus, God makes it very clear to the people of Israel that they should care for the strangers and aliens amongst them. Does the lawyer really need to ask for a definition of neighbour? No, not really, I would suggest, if he was willing to put the law into practice. I think it's also important to notice what happens when Jesus asks the lawyer for a response to his parable. The lawyer had asked, "Who is my neighbour?" However, at the end of the parable, Jesus changes the inflection of the question slightly by asking, "Which of these three do you think was a neighbour?" That is, who proved to be a neighbour. Jesus does not define neighbour as being a group or a tribal identity, but as seeing those who are in need of concern and care and then acting on this. We are all tribal by instinct. We are most comfortable with and usually care about people like us. That could be our family, people who follow our football team, people who share our political affiliation, or people who support the causes that we support. With this story, Jesus is inviting us to reach out beyond our tribal walls. Our neighbours are those who need us, and being a neighbour is about seeing that need and acting on it. So, moving on to the motivations of the characters. If we try and imagine why the travellers acted as they did, it can be easy to demonise the priest and the Levite. As I was doing some reading for this morning, I came across various sermons and writings by Martin Luther King. He seems to have been very taken with the story of the Good Samaritan and referred to it in the last speech he gave on the day before his assassination. A lot of his writings and transcripts of his sermon notes are available online through the King Pays Project, run by Stanford University and the King Center in Atlanta. As MLK explores the motivations of the travellers, he makes two broad sets of comments. Firstly, at a personal level, he suggests that the priest and the Levite ask themselves the question, "If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?" He makes a very human case for their hurrying on. It was a dangerous road. They could have been afraid that had they stopped, they too would have been beaten. The robbers could still have been around. Or maybe they thought the man lying on the ground was just a faker, using a pretend wound to lure passing travellers to help him, and then they too would be attacked and robbed. All very human concerns. In contrast, MLK says, the Samaritan asked a different question. Rather than ask, "If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?" he suggests that the Samaritan asked, "If I don't stop to help this man, what will happen to him?" And MLK goes on to describe the Samaritan as having the capacity for what he called universal altruism. He looked beyond race, religion, nationality, beyond tribal identity, and saw a fellow human in need. Over and above this, he suggests that the Good Samaritan possessed the capacity for a dangerous altruism. He may well have shared the concerns for his personal safety that the priest and the Levite had, and yet he risked his life to save a brother. And going further, MLK suggests that the Good Samaritan was excessively altruistic. He personally tended to the man's wounds, picked him up, and cared for him. However, when MLK looks beyond these immediate actions, and in his second set of comments, he finds some shortcomings in the conduct of the Samaritan. In MLK's words, he sought to soothe the effects of evil without going back to uproot the causes. Now, I'm not sure that this was actually part of the point that Jesus was trying to make in his parable. However, it is perhaps not surprising that someone so steeped in campaigning for social justice used this parable to make a different point. Like the Good Samaritan, we must always respond with compassion. But there is another aspect of Christian social responsibility which is just as compelling. MLK's point here was that it is just as important to tear down unjust conditions and build anew, rather than just patch things up. The building of the kingdom is a systems task. It is about clearing the Jericho road of its robbers, as well as caring for the victims of robbery. So finally, I'd like us to think about the Samaritans. Samaria and the Samaritans figure more prominently in the twin book of Luke and Acts than in the other Gospels. So who were the Samaritans? We are used to thinking of them as the despised enemies of the Jews. Isn't that how this story works? It's the contrast between the actions of the guys you would expect to be the good guys and the actions of the supposedly despised other. In fact, though, the Samaritans were effectively the Jews' separated brothers and sisters. After the death of King Solomon, the people of Israel had been divided into two nations, Israel in the north, with its capital at Samaria, and Judah in the south, with its capital in Jerusalem. Assyria conquered the northern kingdom in 722 BC, sending the leaders of Israel into exile and bringing foreigners to settle among the remnants of the population. By the time of Jesus, Samaritan and Jewish culture and religion had diverged, and there was certainly tension between them. However, Jesus did not look at the Samaritans and see disaffected religious outcasts. He saw them as estranged brothers and sisters to be brought back into the fold. At the start of the book of Acts, Jesus tells his followers, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." In Luke, then, all Judea and Samaria is one, the historic Israel. And the Samaritans are not a stand-in for all despised or marginalized groups of people. They are the Jewish people's estranged kin. And as Jesus' disciples spread out, taking the good news with them, it is to Samaria and the Samaritans that they go first. Seen like this, then, there is another nuance to the story of the Good Samaritan. Yes, it is a story about the essence of true neighborliness, of reaching out selflessly beyond comfortable identities and acting with compassion. And it is a story about restoring and renewing of relationships. So returning to my initial question, what is it that makes the Good Samaritan good? Or perhaps more directly, what does it mean for each of us to be a Good Samaritan? What does it mean for each of us to go and do likewise? This is a pretty eternal question. I'd like to leave us with 3 start points. Firstly, what would it mean for each of us to see each other as Jesus sees, with no boundaries or limitations, and use this as the jump point, the start point for being a neighbor? And then what would it look like for us to reach out beyond our tribal walls and act as a neighbor? Secondly, what would it mean if we stopped ourselves and asked, if I don't act, what will happen to my neighbor? And perhaps we can extend MLK's question and ask, if I don't act, what will happen to me? What is the cost to me and my relationship with Jesus of not acting as a neighbour? I suggest that the story of the Good Samaritan is not just about modelling self-sacrificial behaviour of one individual to another, but it is about the kind of community and the kind of world that Jesus wants for us. And finally, what would it look like to be part of the healing work of Jesus, restoring and renewing fractured relationships? What does it mean for us to love like a Samaritan? Amen.